This right here that is present is everything. Absolutely everything. There is nothing whatsoever actual that is not right here, right now. The way in which this is so is absolutely inconceivable. There's no way to make sense of it. There's no way to wrap your head around it. There's no way to capture it in a philosophy or in a theory or in any kind of a approach to this or a way to capture this as anything, to make any sense of this. And what's more, the fact that this is ungraspable, the fact that this is completely inconceivable, is enormously powerful. It is the direct revelation that this is, that you are without limit, you are without shortcoming, you are without partiality, you are without the even possibility of incompleteness. And the only thing that prevents us from noticing this fact is that we think we know what this is, typically subliminally, and what we think this is completely wrong, entirely wrong. Simply because absolutely no thought, absolutely no idea can possibly capture what this is. It is uncapturable, it's unresolvable. It is infinite in the literal sense of not able to be resolved down to a finiteness, down to coherence, down to any kind of a structural whole that could then be grasped, that could then be described or held. But unfortunately, typically, since we think we know what this is, in some subtle way, that blocks us and prevents us from noticing directly and appreciating what this actually is. Which doesn't actually change anything, because, of course, what this actually is, what you actually are, is already the case. It can't not be the case. So there's no harm, no foul, in a profound sense. But these misinterpretations, these misunderstandings, can lead to a confusion, can lead to an erroneous interpretation of what events consist of and the impact that they have and the importance they may seem to have. And particularly, they can lead to all sorts of experiences of suffering, of pain, of incompleteness, of failure, all these sorts of notions, which cannot actually exist in reality as it actually is. They can only exist in the context of partial definitions, partial worldviews, which we typically hold as individuals, and we aren't aware we're doing it. We think our understanding of things is pretty good. We may notice it's not perfect. We may say, well, gee, I don't know everything, but what I know is pretty reliable. It's pretty trustworthy. And in actual fact, we're wrong when we think that. We're completely wrong. And because we don't know we're wrong, we don't even question it, because we think we're right. We think we actually know what we know. So this is a slippery problem, because to even get a direct intimation of how wrong we are, how in error we are, how incomplete our misunderstandings of what this is, what we are actually is, requires great good fortune, great luck, a great breaking out of the context of our normal worldview. And typically we don't appreciate that, because we're typically very defensive of our worldview. We have a lot invested in it. We feel threatened if if circumstances or people or encounters challenge our worldview. So our erroneous understanding has a strong defense system. It has a very healthy immune system that guards it from challenge, that guards it from criticism, that guards it from even considering the possibility that it might be wrong. We get very offended, our feathers get rustled, we get angry, we get fearful when confronted with the possibility that something we hold to be true might not be. Which is a challenge because, of course, anything we hold to be true, by definition, is not. Because truth cannot actually be accurately held. It cannot actually be accurately grasped. It cannot actually be accurately defined because of the simple fact that reality is intrinsically undefinable. It is limitless. It is infinite in the mathematical sense. It is bottomless. It is boundaryless. It literally happens to be like that. And so it is not susceptible to definition. It is not amenable to description accurately. And so all our definitions and descriptions are partial. And they're not just a little partial, they're completely partial. They completely miss the mark. A good example of this is a dream. So you're trying to get a handle on what's going on. So there you are, and you're in this situation, and someone's talking to you, and there's some kind of a problem that's threatening you, and you're trying to solve it, and you're trying to go somewhere to get something that's going to help you with this challenge, and this whole situation's going on, and you're trying to resolve it and sort it out and figure out what's going on. But there's one cardinal fact that's not included in any of that narration, that's not included in any of that definition. None of it's actually happening. It's a dream. And if you miss that fact, all the other supposed facts of what is happening within the dream are absurdities. Because actually nothing's happening within a dream, of course. It's just a dream. It's not an event. It's an apparition. But if you miss that fact, you miss all of it. No matter how precise and skillful you are at coming up with interpretations of the action, of the event, of the characters, of the plot of the dream, of the problems, of the challenges, of the projected solutions. And we have a tendency to be exactly the same way with what's happening here. What's actually happening here is inconceivable. And we typically analyze it in terms of our history, our bodies, our personalities, our contacts with other people, our contacts with physical situations and circumstances, all of these orientations, our relationships to objects, our relationships to ideas, all of these sort of complex relationships, and this is what we think is going on here. And none of it is true because we're missing the one cardinal fact, like we might within a dream when we're describing the dream in terms of its plot, missing the fact that, oh, by the way, it's actually a dream. Likewise, what's actually happening here is a very, very strange event that could be said to be analogous to a dream in that it is not happening in the way it seems to be, in terms of our definitions, in terms of our narration, in terms of our defining ourselves, our defining our situations, our defining human beings, our defining space and time, our defining events, and all these various things. These definitions are intrinsically, entirely in error. Entirely in error. And unless we see that clearly, we are lost in insanity, effectively. Like a person who is insane might think everyone's out to get them, or that there's aliens that are stealing their thoughts or telling them what to do, or there's some vast conspiracy. Whatever kind of an interpretation they might have. And a sane person will look at that in that context and say, none of that's actually happening. None of that is actual. And the insane person won't hear that. They won't be able to hear it. They won't be able to process it, because to them that's objectively true. And it's completely self-evident and obvious. And you tell them it's not happening, and they'll just know you're wrong. What are you, you're crazy. You're telling me this isn't happening, you're crazy. And likewise, you go up to a supposedly sane person and you say, by the way, there's no space, there's no time, you don't have a body, there's no event, you are everything beyond space and time. And what's the average person going to do? They're going to look away quickly and walk away fast. Pretend it never happened. No different. They think you're crazy. If I tell someone that, they'll think I'm crazy. And I would be, because that's not true either. But it's more in the right direction. There are two ways to relate to reality. One way is the way that we usually do, the way that most people relate to reality, in terms of interpretations, in terms of circumstances, in terms of what our ideas of what is going on consists of. A narration, an interpretation of, well, I'm here and I'm in Berkeley and I'm in this room and all these people are here and these various things are going on and there's these funny lights flashing and all of this. And or I'm in my job and I don't like it, or I like it a lot and I'm going to get rich, or nobody loves me, everybody hates me, guess I'll go eat worms. All these various stories we tell ourselves in terms of the interpretation of what we think is happening here. Now, all of these interpretations are inaccurate. They cannot be accurate, because what this actually is cannot be interpreted. It cannot be defined in terms of specific circumstances, in terms of any specifics whatsoever, because what this actually is does not resolve itself. It does not come together into simple coherences, into simple entities, into simple conditions that we can then navigate within, that we can define ourselves in terms of, that we can define others in terms of, that we can define our lives in terms of. So all these definitions that we are so expert at creating, that we are so addicted to orienting towards, are complete fabrications, are complete fantasies, are complete delusion, are completely non-existent. They are not real. They are not actual. And yet, what this actually is entirely available, is entirely accessible. It is always right here. In fact, nothing other than reality is right here at all times. This is the only condition that can be present. Unreality cannot be present. What would it be made of? How could unreality present itself? What would be presenting? It would be something non-existent presenting itself. How would that work? So reality is always present, is always available, is always explicit, is always clearly available. We are clearly engaged with reality, and yet, because of the nature of reality, because of the very slippery, open-ended nature of reality, it is so easy to misinterpret what is present in terms of our oversimplifications, in terms of our definitions of what we think we are, what we think our circumstances are, what we think space and time are, what we think causality is, what we think all of these apparent conditions are that are actually entirely non-existent. The condition is very much like a dream. In a dream, we may think, oh, I'm supposed to meet somebody over there, and I have to get over there so I can meet them, and I can talk to them about something very important, and I really have to get over there. And so there's all of this, investment and involvement in terms of circumstances, in terms of conditions, which essentially the imagination is defining into existence as a fantasy. In actuality, in a dream, you don't have to meet anyone. Nothing's going to happen if you meet them. You aren't even in the dream. Your body that's appearing in the dream isn't really there. The body of the person you're supposed to meet that's appearing in the dream isn't really there because it's a dream. So in the face of the fact of what it actually is, these interpretations are revealed as entirely inaccurate, entirely delusional, entirely unreal. And yet what is real, which is, in the case of a dream, is the dreaming itself, is entirely explicit. The dream is, of course, present all the time. When the dream is present, there's a dream. And nothing other than that is happening. When you dream, a dream is present. Dreaming is present. And that's the only actual event that is in existence at that time. And all of these apparent, interpreted into existence circumstances don't actually exist. They're fantasies, they're oversimplifications, they're interpretations that are based on nothing. And exactly the same condition applies in here, what we call the waking condition. What is actually going on here, what this actually is completely inconceivable, completely ungraspable, completely undefinable, completely unresolvable. You cannot pin this down. You cannot find what it is. You cannot get to the bottom of it. It's open. It's open-ended openness. It has astounding properties. It presents itself in terms of all these amazing characteristics, all of this detail, all of these colors and sounds and lights and textures, and we don't even have words for most of the characteristics that are present in this amazing presence. And yet none of this presence, even though it's the basis for and the evidence for our interpretations, none of this presence actually exists in the way that our interpretations imply, in the way that our interpretations define it as existing. And simply discovering that this is the case, simply noticing that this is the case, can give you access to noticing and appreciating the actuality of this condition and the implications of this noticing, the implications of what this is astounding. In terms of our interpretations, we can seem to be limited, we can seem to be suffering, we can seem to be trapped in cause and effect, we can seem to be dependent upon all sorts of things, we can seem to be small, we can all of these sorts of things. And in terms of, if you notice what this actually is, there's no basis for any of those kinds of interpretations. When you notice what this actually is, you discover there's nothing here but this itself. There's nothing whatsoever here but this itself. And you are that. You are this astoundingness, this openness, this inconceivability, this undefinability, this limitlessness that is intrinsically dependent upon absolutely nothing, absolutely free of cause and effect, absolutely unlimited, absolutely open-ended, absolutely infinite. It is actually that. It is like that. It is, and it's plain to see that it's like that if you simply notice what is present and the way that it is present. So you could say there's a choice. You could say you can relate to this as it actually is, which is plain to see, or you can relate to it in terms of our addiction to definitions and narrations and storylines and interpretations and defining, oh, I'm this and you're that and this is that and this is happening and that's happening and I hope this happens and I hope that doesn't happen. All of these kinds of narratives that are, it turns out, wholly without basis, and are a basis only for confusion and pain and suffering, needlessly, because there's nothing there. They aren't real, they aren't actual, they're complete delusions, it's like a crazy person who thinks they're Hitler or something. They don't need to fear of the Nuremberg trials because they're not Hitler. So the fact that they're afraid that they're Hitler is just their insanity. It's a tired delusion. So you can have this big suffering built up based on absolutely nothing, based on a supposition which is not true. It is not true that you are in a body. It is not true that you are limited. It is not true that you were born. It is not true that you will die. It is not true that you have any limitation whatsoever. And the implications of that are very beautiful. And technically speaking, you might say that from a spiritual point of view, the most powerful implication is liberation. When you discover that this is the case, when you discover what this actually is, what you actually are, you discover immediately and completely obviously that there is no basis for suffering. There is no basis for any kind of incompleteness. There is no basis for any kind of partiality. There is no basis for anything other than an astounding positivity, an astounding radiance, an astounding luminosity, an astounding shining life. All that is here is an infinitely shining life force. And you are that. And simply noticing that that is the case is all that's necessary. You don't need to achieve it, because it's already achieved. It already is the case. All that is necessary is simply to notice that fact, to discover that. And it's completely discoverable because it's obviously displayed. How do you all like the new improved light show? I assume there's some thumbs up. I can't see anything. I'm being blinded here. Experience is like a light shining. A light shining from nowhere that can be found. A light shining in a space that cannot be found. A light whose shining is seen, but it cannot be found how it is seen and what it is seen by. That's all it is. It's nothing more than that. All of our ideas of a world and our lives and our relationships and our bodies and our history and all of these other abstractions are nothing whatsoever other than this miraculous and strange light shining from nowhere. And this can be seen directly, this can be known directly. And unless you come to see that, unless you come to know that as the actuality that it is, you are lost in insanity, you are lost in confusion, lost in delusion. Which is the condition that most people spend their lives in. So there's not really a problem with that. Except for the fact that it isn't real, it isn't true, and what's more is it isn't necessary. It doesn't have to be that way. You don't have to be confused. You don't have to be lost in misinterpretation, in basically craziness, in insanity. Because it is possible to come to notice and appreciate what this actually is. And the simplest way to begin is just consider the possibility that all of your interpretations, every interpretation you ever had as to what's going on here, what you are, what this is, what your history is, what space is, what time is, what events are, what causality is, basically everything that whatsoever that you think you know, just to consider the possibility that maybe it's not accurate, maybe it's not true. And yet, this presence, what we call the field of experience maybe, is here, is actual, is examinable. And if you examine this actuality, this actual presence, outside of the context of our usual interpretations, it may be that you can discover what it actually is. It's not actually hard to see what it is. Seeing what this is not difficult. What's difficult is disentangling yourself from addiction to your usual interpretations, from your illusion, from your narrative, from your storylines. Typically, these storylines and interpretations and investment in them seems to be very addictive. It seems to be extremely addictive, and typically we have a very hard time letting go of that, letting go into just unknowing. And yet, we're all going to have to on our deathbed, if not sooner. I mean, when you're done your deathbed, what difference does it make what your history is? What difference does it make what your body is? What difference does it make what the world is when you're about to, it's all about to disappear, you're about to leave it? Since that's going to happen anyway, why not toy with the idea of what would it be like now? Or, simulate, you can simulate it, you can imagine, well, here I am, what if this was my deathbed? What if I was going to die in 10 minutes? And I was going to have to let go of all this anyway. What does it feel like to let go of everything? To just let go of investment, of clinging to this, these relationships, these our position in our narrative, our position in our lives, our position in what we think we are and what we think we're doing. What would it be like to just let go of that completely and just be here? It's not any different, really, than when you are doing all the interpreting and all the investment. You are just here, after all. So that's really the only fact. That's really the actual situation that we find ourselves in. But we typically don't let ourselves notice that because of all of this added interpretation, all of this added importance and urgency about what we're doing and what we hope to achieve and what we hope to avoid, and our fears and our hopes and all of these things. Where are your fears and your hopes going to be on your deathbed? Where are they going to be? What's there to hope for? What's there to fear, for that matter? It's too late at that point. So that situation is going to come anyway. This one principle is the entire basis of genuine spirituality, is the entire basis of what has been called spiritual confusion or delusion, and what is called realization or enlightenment. This one principle. And it can be addressed directly. And this principle is the actuality of your experience. Simply put, learning what the actuality of your experience is, or more accurately, noticing what the actuality of your experience really is, and noticing especially how profoundly and utterly it diverges from what we're used to thinking it is, affects a spontaneous, automatic, unconscious reorientation to your experience, which is what's called liberation, which is what's called realization. It's not anything you have to do. It has absolutely nothing to do with your actions, with how you hold yourself, with how you think, with your behavior, with needing to wear funny clothes or have funny names or anything like that. It's simply about noticing what is actually present right here, right now. What this presence is. Your experience is present, clearly, right? And what is it that is present? What is it that is present? Simply discovering and noticing and giving some attention to that fact, that condition exactly as it is, again, affects a complete unconscious reorientation to your experience that is profound in its effect in terms of what you feel like to yourself, what your life feels like. In a condition of misunderstanding, our lives can feel stuck, we can feel small, we can feel insecure, we can feel dependent upon circumstances, we can feel terrified of death, we can feel terrified of disease, we can feel terrified of bad luck, we can feel terrified of other people. In short, we can feel terrified. When we discover what this actually is, you have absolute first-hand, self-verifying, undeniable presentation of the fact that things aren't like that. There is nothing whatsoever that is undependable, that is unreliable, that is incomplete, that is a basis for suffering, that is a basis for panic or fear or catastrophizing about the future. So what is it that is actually present? What is it that's actually present? Well, clearly your experience, right? Can you find anything other than your experience that's present? It's like your experience is here and then there's something else somewhere sitting, impinging itself on you. Can you find anything like that? Obviously not. That's a bit of a joke. Not a very good joke, judging by the response. So, the yoga of radiant presence is about what this is that is present that we call experience. What this is that is present. Your experience alone exists. Nothing other than your experience exists. Your experience is like a bubble. And anything that is actual is appearing within that bubble. Look at the facts. When you look at the sun, where is the sun appearing? Within your experience. Can you see the sun or experience the sun outside of your experience? Can it be done? Clearly not. It's very much like a dream. Right? When you're dreaming, obviously anything you happen to dream is appearing within the dream. Can you dream anything outside the dream? If you did, it would appear within the dream, wouldn't it? So, it sounds maybe kind of trite or kind of simple and obvious, but if you look at the fact of it, your experience is a bubble that contains the entirety of reality, as far as you know, as far as you can tell. There's nothing else, there's nothing outside of it. You can't know whether or not there's anyone else that's having experience, right? Because all you can know about other people is that they're appearing in your experience. You can suppose that maybe you're appearing in their experience, but you can't know that. I mean, think about when you dream again. You dream and you're talking to somebody, and in the dream you may think that person is actually there and is experiencing you, but you wake up and you know there was no one there. You know, I was experiencing the whole thing. I was the sole experiencer. Maybe not. Maybe that person you dreamed about was actual and you were appearing in their dream. But you can't know that. You can't know that. That's just an abstraction, right? That's just a pie in the sky. That's just a concept. It's speculation. It's theoretical, and you can theorize about anything until the cows come home, and it can be great fun, but it's not. It doesn't tie into actuality at all. So, this is a very powerful fact. The actuality of the field of your experience is the totality of actuality. It's the totality of reality. It's the totality of presence. It's the totality of existence. You cannot find anything that exists outside of the field of your experience. I mean, can you? Try to find something outside your experience. It's actual in some sense. We're used to thinking that there's something outside our experience. We're used to thinking, well, I'm experiencing this room, but this building's actually here, and when I leave the building, it's still standing, right? When I'm not seeing it, when I'm not touching it, when it's not appearing in my experience, it's still here. We're used to thinking that. But when I'm not here and I'm not seeing this building, and I think the building's still here, what is present in my experience? The idea that the building exists. Is anything else present? It's just an idea. Suppose I told you that there's a building somewhere that you've never seen and you're never going to see, but it's sitting there. And you can go, okay, I'll take that on faith. I'll give them the benefit of that. Okay, there's this building sitting there. How does that building exist in your experience? It exists as an idea, right? Now, the idea of this building that you've never seen and you're never going to see, existing in your experience as an idea, and the idea of this building before you saw it today, if you've never seen it before, or after you go to bed tonight and you're not seeing it, exists in exactly the same way, with exactly the same reality, as nothing but an idea in your experience. In other words, the objective world is a theory. The objective world is an idea. The objective world is a conceptual frame of reference that exists solely as ideas within your experience. Right? So we're used to thinking that, well, this objective world is really there. We feel it. We feel that it's there. But it's hard. But wait, no, there's hardness. Wait a minute, that's within my experience, isn't it? Is this chair hard when I'm not experiencing it? Some chair in the dining room right now, is it hard? I mean, how can I know unless I go have the chair appear within my field of experience and whack it or touch it, right? How can I know? It's just an idea. Is the dining hall there? Anyone know if the dining hall is still there? I mean, you can suppose, yeah, it's probably still there. I mean, sure, but can you know it? You can't know it, because the idea that it is, the idea that the world doesn't just appear in real time for our convenience, the way a dream does, right? You know how when you're dreaming, you walk out the door and there you are on the sidewalk or whatever, and whatever's going on. All that just appeared that moment for you, right? It's not like the sidewalk was sitting there waiting for you to walk out the door, right? It all just poof. Magically, instantaneously, in all its splendor, just appears in real time. How do you know that doesn't happen in this waking condition? How do you know that when you're not in the dining hall, it disappears, it's gone? I'm not saying it is or it isn't. I'm saying that the notion that it is or it isn't is just a concept, so who cares? It's a concept like the Easter Bunny or Santa Claus. It doesn't have any actuality. If there's any buzzword for our retreat, the buzzword is actuality. Actuality. We will be touching on actuality a lot during the course of the next 4 days. So, notice that your experience is actual. Right? Clearly, your experience is actual. And notice that nothing else whatsoever is actual. You can't find anything else that's actual, because if you find it, it's appearing within your experience. Now, the operative principle of the yoga of radiant presence, although you don't need to particularly worry about this because it takes care of itself, is the authority and the empowerment of actuality. Actuality alone has power. What is actual has power. What is not actual does not have power. We take advantage of this fact in Yoga of Radiant Presence by noticing the actuality of what appears as our experience, and we'll be getting into that much more precisely in terms of what is appearing and how it's appearing as experience. But noticing the actuality of what appears and how it appears is powerful, it is transformative, it spontaneously reorients and readjusts your orientation to what you are, to what this is. Again, you don't need to do anything. It's nothing you need to do. It's nothing you need to contrive. It's nothing you need to maintain. It's nothing you need to assert. Just noticing this actuality. The actuality has power. It has objective force. And that power is transformative. That power does all the work. There is no requirement to do anything or create anything or maintain any state of mind or achieve any special condition or avoid any other condition or this, that, or the other. Wholly unimportant. Now, in general, pay attention to the actuality of your own experience, and by that I just mean the presence of your experience. It's very easy in retreats and talks, and we'll be spending a certain amount of time, a rather large amount of time, sitting around this room and other places talking, and I'll be droning on. You'll be sitting, and it's really easy to sort of numb out and get hypnotized and get spaced out on the words and sort of get into a passive condition. So don't be passive. Be actively engaged with the presence of your experience. Be actively feeling the presence of your experience. It's much more important than any words I say. The words I say are not nearly as important as the sound you're hearing when you hear me speak. What you see is not nearly as important as the light you see when you're seeing, so on and so forth. So notice this and pay attention to this, and again we'll be getting into this in much more depth as we go onwards. So watch out for slipping into passivity or slipping into credulity and just sort of numbly following along and just sort of being a receptor. You don't be a receptor, be an engager. Be engaged with the presence and the actuality of your experience, however it's showing up. What goes right along with that is be authentic, be genuine. If things are being tossed around here and you think it's bullshit or you can't connect with it, own it. Just that's how it is for me. That's much more important It's much more important for you to be in the actuality of where you are, where you feel you are, than to try to approximate or be pretending to conform or aspiring to fitting into some kind of notion of how you think it's supposed to be or you're supposed to be or what you're supposed to be seeing, you know. So be authentic, be genuine, you know, rest in your actual condition at the moment. And that, you know, sort of goes hand in hand with being with the actuality of your experience. Now, the whole essence of yoga of radiant presence is to notice how much you are used to orienting towards things by what you think they are, and shift to noticing what is actually present, which is not defined, is it? You know, you can define. You can look at me and you can say, oh, you know, there's this guy sitting there and he's male and he's wearing a brownish T-shirt and this, that, and the other, and so there's all these definitions and labels. But that's not what you're actually seeing. What are you seeing? Well, you can't say what you're seeing. You're seeing light. You're seeing what is light. You can't say what light is. So right away, the actuality of the experience of me is something completely other than any narration or any interpretation you could come up with about what I am or what it is you're seeing. And typically, as humans in our modern culture, and maybe throughout most cultures, we're very used to relating to our experience in terms of these narratives and definitions, to the point we don't even notice we're doing it. Oh, this is a room. Oh, you know, we're people. Oh, this is a spiritual retreat. Oh, this, that, and the other. We have all these narratives and labels and definitions that we unconsciously and effortlessly apply to our experience, and we may have a tendency to relate to our experience as if it actually was that. This is not a room. I am not a human being. You are not a human being. This is not a computer. If I had a pipe, I'd say, this is not a pipe.
Did you say it French?
Poorly. So we're going to be playing with this. We're going to be exploring this. And again, don't worry about it. It's not a matter of being a Nazi or trying to pretend to be nonverbal. It's just a matter of noticing how verbal we are, how unconsciously verbal we are, and how all of our words and ideas coexist in this spontaneous presence, which is entirely nonverbal, right? Right now, your field of vision is full of light, right? And there's not a word to be seen. There are no words present in, well, few words. There are no words present in your field of vision. It's all light. There's no words there. There's no ideas present in your field of vision. It's color. It's texture. And of course, color and texture are ideas, but the actuality that they refer to are not, are they? You know, this is real vision. What you're experiencing is real vision. And the fact that you may be able to think about it does not affect the vision itself, does it? So when I look around and I think, oh, this is a room, what I'm seeing doesn't change by me calling it a room. That's an idea which occurs in the field of my mentality, let's say. Okay? So there's this notion of room in my mind, but what my vision is seeing doesn't change, does it? So even though we are so verbal and so conceptual spontaneously, that verbality and that conceptuality exists as a relatively small field of event in a vast, spontaneous presence of experience, which is entirely nonverbal. Your entire field of vision is nonverbal, non-conceptual. Your entire field of sound is nonverbal, non-conceptual. Now I'm sitting here talking, you may think, oh, I'm saying words. I'm not saying words, I'm making sounds, I'm making noises, I'm singing. Right? And yet your mind can generate a thought stream that interprets these sounds as if they were words and formulates them as if they were ideas and generates a whole elaborate scenario as if it referred to something that you can extract meaning from. But that's all happening in your mind. That's not happening in your hearing. Your hearing. That is no more verbal than that is. I mean, I can be talking like this, or nothing happened, nothing changed. But the mind goes, wait a minute, he stopped talking. It's the same thing. Sound is non-conceptual. Sound is non-verbal. Sound is actual presence. Light is actual presence. Sensation of touch, experience of your body, experience of contact, is actual presence. Taste and smell, actual presence. Now here's the kicker, here's the big one. Thought is actual presence. Thought is not ideas. Thought is not words. Thought is not concepts. Thought is the presence of a subtle field of dynamic energy that is just like the presence of the subtle field of dynamic energy that fills your field of vision. That's just like the presence of the subtle field of dynamic energy that fills your hearing, and so on and so forth. So, and it's easy to notice this because even when you're thinking words and ideas, there's all this other sort of little buzzy, hummy stuff going on in the background. It's not really about anything. It's just sort of vague little moods and vibes and flavors, right? And every now and then we sort of something sort of surfaces like a big wave on the ocean. And we go, oh, there's a thought, and oh, I'm thinking about such and such. But again, that's a kind of a piggybacking on this presence of a field of spontaneously present dynamic energy that we can call mentality, that we can call mental energy, whatever. And the mental energy is always full. Now, all of the fields of your experience are always full. Your field of vision is always full. It's never full. It's never empty. It's full from end to end and from top to bottom, right? Not that you can find a top and a bottom, it gets a little fuzzy. But it's full. It's always full. You close your eyes, it's still full. I mean, it's full of this little kind of vague little flickers or whatever, but it's still full, right? You go to sleep, it's still full. You start dreaming, it's still full. So your field of vision is always full. There's never a point where it is any less or more content in your field of vision. Same, of course, applies to field of hearing, field of sensation, so on and so forth, and field of mentality. The field of mentality is always full, even if you're not thinking about anything. And any of you that have experienced with intense meditation will know about this very obviously. You learn a lot about thought when you try and stop thinking. Okay. Another really useful principle in the yoga of radiant presence is that the main principle of navigating is curiosity. Your attention doesn't go where you try and put it. Your attention goes where it's drawn because it goes, oh, that's really interesting. Oh, that's really interesting. Oh. Our attention is very much like a 3-year-old at a carnival or something. And it's like, oh wow, oh wow. And if you look at your attention, you'll notice this. It's always the case. It's always been the case. You're sitting having a conversation with something, and your thoughts drift off, and you see something over there. It's not like you decided to look over there. Your attention just sort of goes over there because it's interesting. It's curious. Your attention is curious. Your attention is interested. Your attention, is very vibrant with this kind of curiosity. So seduction, curiosity, is the main navigating principle within experience, not intention, not aspiration, not willpower. And we can use this, or we can certainly explore this in the course of this yoga. So that's a sort of a very cursory look at some of the general principles that we'll be looking at. The next bit we'll be looking at is what exactly is this radiant present. Before I go there, I'd like to mention that many of you were at the previous retreat that we did, and you may think, oh, I've been over this before. Because essentially it's a similar contact point, it's a similar launching point in terms of what we're dealing with. However, the very nature of what this is a jumping off point into infinity, a jumping off point into open-endedness. You can and will always go into deeper and very different dimensions of exploration with this. In fact, all of your experience is nothing but this, so you're always doing this anyway. But that's getting a little ahead of ourselves. So, there's nothing that exists but the bubble of your experience. And what is present in your experience, we're used to calling, light, sound, thought, sensation. If you look really closely, what is light? Well, it's kind of a very sort of a high frequency radiant vibration or something, right? Whatever. I mean, obviously you can't grasp that, you can't categorize it, but it's this present instantaneous vibrancy that occurs within a certain field of quality that we effortlessly identify as light, right? What is sound? Well, likewise, sound is also a spontaneous present vibrancy, isn't it? It's kind of maybe a different frequency range, different sort of a textural quality than what we call light, but it's basically the same kind of stuff. It's sort of an instantaneous buzzing. Well, light's an instantaneous buzzing too, on a different frequency. Well, what is sensation? Well, you feel sensation. What is it? How do you know you're touching something? It's this tingling touch. We may be used to thinking or imagining our touch is fairly constant, but if you touch something, if you actually feel something, you'll notice it instantaneously refreshes and vibrates and tingles and sparkles. So again, we look at touch, we discover a very similar dynamic quality, a similar dynamic instantaneous presence. And so what is thought? Well, thought is very interesting, isn't it? Thought is something. There's a substance there. How do you know you're thinking? You know you're thinking because there is something present. Just like you know you're seeing because there's something present. Now we have a word for what's present when you're seeing, which is light. And thought, thought
sounds kind of abstract. What is thought? Well, we don't usually think of thought as a stuff. But thought, if you look at what is present when you're thinking in the mind, it is actually a dynamic textural presence. It's a dynamic, a vibrant quality. It's very tenuous, right? It's very, it's hard to qualify what it is, but it's not nothing. It's something. There's stuff there, in the same sense that there's stuff in your field of vision and stuff in your field of hearing. There's a stuff, there's a quality, there's a substance, a substantiality to thought. And you know that thought is happening, you know you're thinking when you experience this substantial presence, which is dynamic, right? It's vibratory, it's tingly, like all of our sense experiences are. They're tingly when we look at them close, they're sparkly, they're alive, they're bzzz. They're instantaneously flashing in the present moment only. So, instead of having these words like light and sound and touch and thought and all these different words for something which is essentially the same thing, maybe in different frequencies or what have you. I've coined or appropriated a word to cover that entire gamut of what is present as experience. And I call it radiance. So if you look at light, you're actually looking at radiance. If you look at sound, you're actually looking at radiance. If you look at thought, you're actually looking at radiance. And not that radiance defines it, radiance is just a word, but again, it refers to and it unifies the substance of what is present. Because something is present, right? I mean, when you're seeing, something is present. Light is really obviously present. It's not like you have to. It's not like it's a stretch or a reach to get that light is present. It's completely obvious. It's intuitively plain. And likewise with sound, likewise with sensation, and likewise with thought. And what is present is this radiance. So, what are some of the qualities of this radiance? Well, it's actual. It's actual. It's actually here. It's actually present within the experience. This radiance is present. Light is present. Sound is present. Sensation is present. Thought is present, right? I mean, this is plain to see. You don't need to go out to them. You don't need to reach out to them. It's not like they're somewhere hidden off and somewhere and you have to somehow make a lot of effort to bridge the gap. On the contrary, it comes to you. You can't shut it off. Try and stop light. Try and stop your field of vision. You can't do it, obviously, because light shines. Light shines. Light always shines. You close your eyes and light shines. You go to sleep and light shines. So, radiance is present. Radiance is dynamic. It's always sparkling, tingling, buzzing, flashing. It's, like fireflies dancing around. If you look at the texture of your experience, you will notice this. What is the texture of light like? Well, obviously you can't answer these questions in words because that defeats the purpose. And it's also impossible because this actuality that is present is non-verbal, it's non-conceptual. And it turns out it's infinite, so it could not be conceptualized even if you were, the ultimate genius of analysis, of conceptualization. You would not be able to say what this is. You would not be able to put it into concepts because it is infinite. But anyway, it's this absolute flickering dynamism. And it's absolutely instantaneous, isn't it? Your experience happens only right now. Try and find the past. Experientially, try and find the past. Of course, we all have the idea of the past. We all know where we were yesterday. But that's an idea, isn't it? Experientially, try and find the past. Obviously, it can't be done. Try and find the future. It can't be done. Now here's the fun one. Try and find the present. Well, it's right here. Okay, what does that mean? How long does the present moment last? Is it here? Is it sitting here? Or is it what? Well, you can't say. You can't say, can you? But it's momentary. It's instantaneous. It's not temporal. Time does not work the way we usually think of it as working as just sort of a flow. You can't find a flow. I mean, there's nothing, So you look at the present moment, like look back, just a hair into the past. It's like there's nothing. You step off a cliff. There's nothing there. Look a tiny bit into the future. There's nothing there. So there's just this instantaneous moment, which is continually changing in the way it presents itself in terms of the qualities that are present, right? I mean, there's no experience whatsoever that has any stability, that has any persistence, right? You look at anything, even if you say, well, it's not moving, nothing's happening, but your experience of it is changing, your experience of it is flickering, it's flashing. These things, in the field of vision, for example, we're all used to supposing that the things we're looking at are relatively stable and sitting there, and so we're very numb with imposing that conceptualization on our field of vision. But a real easy experiment to perform is to close your eyes and look at the field of vision there, where there's no objects in particular. And you will discover, well, what's present? Well, there's this very subtle sort of a glowing and flickering and little tiny, tiny, tiny flashes, instantaneous, that sort of come and go, and they sort of group together in various apparent groupings or whatever, but you can't find any stability whatsoever. You can't find anything that actually persists or is stable in the field of vision. The light itself, when your eyes are closed, is just fluid. It's totally unstable. And then you open your eyes, and you're seeing patterns that are relatively apparently stable, but they're all made up of the same fluidity. You know, and you can experiment. A good experiment to do is look at a blank wall or something, and when you look at it, you're seeing the wall, and you close your eyes and look at this, and become accustomed to that dynamism. Then open your eyes again, look at the wall, close your eyes and look at the dynamism, and very quickly you'll see that your experience of the wall is just as dynamic as your experience when your eyes are closed. And then you can look at more complex images, and you'll discover the same thing. You'll discover that, you look at someone's face, and it's morphing and breathing and changing, and and we typically don't notice this because we're very used to imposing a conceptual stability on things. Oh, I'm looking at you, so you look like you, and of course you look like you, which glosses over the details of the actual morphing, the experiential dynamism of vision. And of course we find this in all sense fields and all sense experience. So the radiance is the only thing that's present. You can't find anything present other than the radiance. I mean, it might look like light, it might look like thought, it might look like sensation, it might look like sound, and so on and so forth. But you can't find anything present, anything actual, other than this radiance, this substance of experience, this substance that presents itself as experience. So, any experience is made of this dynamism of radiance. And there is nothing else. There is nothing else. Now, another interesting thing about radiance is it is felt. We used to qualify in that all sorts of ways. We used to say, I see light. What does seeing mean? Seeing means feeling experientially. Right? When you're seeing light, your consciousness is feeling it. Right? Sensation is obviously felt. We're used to thinking that. Even our word felt generally applies to sensation of touch. But hearing is feeling sound. Consciousness is feeling sound, just direct engagement. Now, this is another aspect of the radiant presence, is that there's no medium. The radiance is felt here. And what feels it is here. There's no gap to be bridged. There's no there and here. It's just radiance. radiant presence here. And it feels itself here. So if radiance is being felt, what is feeling it? What is it that's feeling it? You look and you try and find, what's feeling radiance? Well, you can't find anything, can you? The apparition of radiance is it's being felt. So you see light. Right now you see light. The light is being felt experientially, right? And where is it being felt? It's being felt in the light, in the presence of the light. The light is feeling itself. There's sound present. You're hearing sound. You're hearing me talk. You're hearing, echoes in the room and rustles and what have you. Where is that happening? It's happening in the sound. The sound is being felt in the sound. So on and so forth. Thinking, where is thinking being felt? Where is thought being felt? Well, it's being felt in thought. Thought feels itself. So the radiance feels itself. This is very different than we're used to thinking of. We're used to thinking of, I'm over here somewhere and my experience is out there and I'm sort of feeling my experience, and there's somehow this gap is being bridged by some mysterious sensoria or what have you, right? But look at it up close. Look at it experientially and strip it down to its bare elements. All light is present, and that presence is the experience of it being present. There's no extra components in there. There's no experiencer. There's no medium of experience. It's just light is present is the experience of light. Sound is present is the experience of sound. So there's direct engagement. The radiance is directly engaged with itself, and that's the only thing happening here. So what is being experienced is radiance. What is experiencing is radiance. So we have these words, experienced and experiencing, like a subject and object. They're fiction. But again, play with this for yourself, explore it for yourself. Look at this. Now, tonight is a kind of a theoretical presentation of all this stuff. Tomorrow morning we're going to start doing a meditation, which is going to be an exploration of this stuff much more directly, which is really the meat of this retreat. And then you get to play with this stuff very directly and look for yourself and find the truth of what this is. Okay. It sounds pretty far out. It sounds pretty amazing. It sounds pretty extreme in terms of, I suppose most people's usual ideas of what's going on here. And that may be so, but radiance is not special. Radiance is absolute normalcy. Radiance is all that has ever been, all that ever will be. Radiance is, going to sleep, dreaming, getting up out of bed in the morning, having breakfast, going to work. All of that is radiance. So radiance is not special. Radiance is what the normal condition entirely is and has always been. And the fact that radiance turns out to be this astounding, transcendental, trippy condition, event, is just how it is. It's not special in itself. It's not like there's some dullness or some normalcy that this incredible revelation of radiance is sort of towering above as some great... No. It's like we had it wrong. There never was any dull pedestrian normalcy. There never was any, the horror of human existence. There never was any of those things. It's all a misunderstanding of this fundamental fact, of this instantaneous presence of transcendental radiance. Another aspect of radiance is that it comes as its fullness. It comes as its entirety. We're very used to paying attention to very small portions of the experiential field and giving those small portions an enormous amount of weight and relevance, and basically ignoring vast other portions of the field. In actual fact, that's not the case. In actual fact, everything that appears is equally real, is equally important. Just because you happen to be looking at something or thinking about something does not make it particularly important. Your entire field of vision is the object of your vision. I may say, oh, I'm looking at this, or I'm looking at that, or I'm looking at this. But when I look at you, the room doesn't go away, does it? The other people don't go away. Things don't go away. Everything comes as a whole. Everything comes together as a full field. And we are used to separating out and giving this exaggerated importance to relatively small portions of it. Like you're reading a book, you may think the particular word you're looking at or the sentence you're reading is what's important. But all the printing on the page is equally important. The paper you're seeing is equally important. You're seeing around the paper to your lap that it's sitting on is equally important. You're seeing equally important, equally actual, equally relevant. So we're used to, in terms of information theory, there's this concept of signal to noise, where there's the signal, which is the content of a message, and then there's the noise, which is the medium or the static or what have you, the extras. And radiance doesn't work like that. Radiance is all signal. Radiance is all message. And the message is the radiance itself. The message of seeing is light. You see me, the message isn't me, the message is light. You hear talking, the message isn't what's being said, the message is sound, which is radiance. And the radiance intrinsically and effortlessly embodies all of these degrees of meaningfulness that we abstract out in terms of these particular things. So you may think, oh gosh, what he's saying is really interesting. It's only interesting because it's intrinsic in the radiance that the radiance can appear that way. But the interest comes from the radiance. All content comes from the radiance, comes from the medium. And we're covering a lot of ground and skipping over a lot of things now. We'll be dipping back into all of this again and again in much greater depth over the next few days. So, everything that you refer to is actually referring to radiance. When you talk about your body, you're actually talking about radiance. When you talk about someone else, you're actually talking about radiance. When you talk about, Joshua Tree, you're talking about radiance. When you talk about the earth, you're talking about radiance. When you talk about the political race, you're talking about radiance. When you talk about your life, your hopes, your successes and failures, you're talking about radiance. When you talk about, your death, your health, your aging, you're talking about radiance. So radiance is the soul condition. And radiance can effortlessly appear as all of these conditions that we think of as constituting the events of our lives and the things we consider important, and for that matter the things we consider unimportant, but it's all just radiance. It's all radiance. Just like in a dream, whatever you happen to be dreaming about is just dreaming. It's just dream. The dream is the ever-present content of a dream. And it can look like anything. I mean, how many dreams have you had in your life? And every single one of them has looked different, right? But it's all just been the dreaming present. The dreaming which can endlessly spin off infinite versions of meaningfulness out of its intrinsic meaningfulness. Dreams are meaningful not because the dreams are meaningful. Dreams are meaningful because dreaming is meaningful. It's the dreaming that generates the meaning. The dreams are just convenient apparitions. And the same thing is true in our waking life. We think of the events of our lives. You think of the events of your life and your history and the things that matter to you and what you're trying to achieve and the things you struggled with and so on and so forth. All of that content, all of that meaningfulness is effortlessly spun off by the radiance and is nothing other than the radiance. So, when you learn to relate to radiance, you learn to relate to true meaningfulness. You learn to relate to the fullness of your life, because the radiance is always full, even if it's presenting itself as apparently partial. The radiance is always all qualities, even if it presents itself as apparently this or that or the other groups of qualities as dominant. So right now you're seeing certain qualities of light in your field of vision. You're going to, after this meeting, you're going to walk out into the night and you'll be seeing certain other qualities as dominant in your field of vision, with different sort of implications of meaningfulness. The radiance effortlessly spits these things off, and all the meaningfulness that's presented in any form is the meaningfulness of the radiance itself. It comes from the radiance. It doesn't exist in itself. A lot of traditions make a big deal about clarity, and a lot of traditions make a big deal about awareness, and a lot of traditions sum them together, and that's all very well and good. It's important to understand what the actual clarity, the important clarity is, what the actual awareness, the important awareness is. There's a kind of a clarity that you can achieve through sort of concentration of keeping clear, staying with clarity, all this kind of thing. That doesn't matter at all. That's not an important clarity. Likewise, awareness. It's a kind of awareness you can maintain through sort of a focus of awareness. And, now I'm aware, I'm being present. Doesn't matter at all. The important presence, the important clarity, the important awareness is the one that's doing itself. The clarity with which all this appears. Suppose you're unclear. Suppose you're stone drunk and passing out and you just got hit by a car. So you're in pretty bad shape. And yet all of those conditions appear in what? They appear in awareness. They appear in clarity. It's not a clarity that you need to ramp up or maintain or hold or orient yourself to or position or strategize about. It's the inherent clarity. All of those conditions, if they're happening, are present. And again, it's not a presence you need to do, it's the presence that just is. The classic example, of course, is going to sleep. When you go into sleep, you're just about gone, and you're pretty darn fuzzy, and the world's faded away, and you're just barely thinking, and you basically, phased out pretty thoroughly. But all of that condition is occurring in presence. All of that condition is present, or it wouldn't be actual. It's occurring in clarity, or it wouldn't be what it is. So, discovering clarity and discovering awareness is the same as discovering presence, which is the fact that this is. Not the way in which it is, not how it is. It's fuzzy, or it's confused, or it's dizzy, or that doesn't matter at all. How does dizziness appear? How does fuzziness appear? How does confusion appear? They have to appear in presence, or they wouldn't exist at all. So, the important presence, the important clarity, the important awareness is the inherent quality that this is inalienably. And it is powerful. It is very, very powerful because it's not sensitive to conditions. It doesn't depend upon conditions. It's independent. Presence doesn't need you to do it. Presence, on the contrary, is doing you. And it never stops. And actually, you are present. So the more you come, like the meditation this morning, the more you come to an awareness of presence itself, of the presence, of the actuality of presence, the more you discover what you actually are. Which is prior to your body, prior to your personality, prior to your function. It is just being itself. It's just the actuality, the presence of this field of experience. which is not dependent upon any of those things. You know, on your deathbed, your body's going to be fading fast in every way. Experientially, it's going to be fading out, but your presence will not be. Being doesn't stop. Being doesn't stop, because being is not dependent upon the body. The body is an extrusion of being, just like a dream is an extrusion of being. Before you start dreaming, there's being in deep sleep. And then spontaneously a dream appears. And the dream is not a new being or an additional being. It's existing within the pre-existing being that is always, it always is. The presence that always is. Presence and being are synonymous. But being is an abstraction. Presence is concrete. Right? Presence is completely obvious. I mean, you can feel it. And this is the PowerPoint of access in Yoga Radiant Presence, is the fact that presence is actual. You can actually feel it, you can interface with it, you can swim around in it, you can explore it. I mean, it's very subtle, it's irrational, you can't say how that happens or what's happening when that happens, but nonetheless you can do it. And this is very powerful. And the important point about that is that it's impersonal. And then you discover that everything you think of as personal is a side system of you. You are not personal. I mean, you're you, but what you actually are is this fundamental field of being, this fundamental field of presence that your human self and your human body and your human life is just an outgrowth of, just like a dream is an outgrowth of sleep. And when you die, the dream, just like in sleep, when a dream ends, the dream stops, but being doesn't stop. Now that's just an assertion for you at this point, but you'll find out. The rubber will hit the road. You will be on your deathbed before too very long. And then you get to see for yourself. We all will.
Confusion. If someone feels confused, they might feel like there's something wrong. You might feel like you're supposed to have a handle on things, you're supposed to be sorting things out, you're supposed to know what's going on, you're supposed to somehow be in control of things. I think this is very typical in the way people think of things. Surprisingly, exactly the opposite is the case. Confusion is our native condition. It's impossible to pin down what this is. It's absolutely impossible to define exactly what anything consists of, or how it consists of that, or where it is, or any aspect of it whatsoever. But our normal human stance, the normal sort of consensus reality view, is we're supposed to be in denial of that. We're supposed to pretend we know what things are. We're supposed to have a handle on things. We're supposed to know who we are, what we are, what's going on, how it works, all of this. But it's all bravado. It's all bullshit. It's all manufactured. It's all churned into existence in our imagination. Typically we feel an urgency to have a handle on things, or at least to seem to have a handle on things, to have a convincing veneer that we have a handle on things. And typically we get very insecure if we feel like we don't. We feel like we start scrambling and feel, wait a minute, I'm confused, I don't know what's going on here, what's happening, where am I, what's going on? But in actuality, if you're honest, if you look very closely at your actual condition, you cannot know exactly what anything is. You can't know exactly how anything works. You can't know exactly what you are. You can't know exactly where you are. You can't know exactly how you got here. You can't know exactly where you're going. You can't know exactly why you're here. You can't know exactly what you're doing here. All of these are inscrutable. Yet it doesn't really matter, because we are fully engaged in the flow of our lives. Even if you don't know what you're doing it. Even if you don't know where you are, you're here. So all of this sort of orienting towards definition, orienting towards describability, orienting towards having a handle on things, is just posturing, it's just bravado, and in no way contributes to, or for that matter detracts from, our actual engagement with the process of life, with the process of actually living, with the process of actually being what we are, the way we are. None of which is describable, none of which is analyzable, none of which can be sorted out. In short, it's all intrinsically confusing. So confusion is actually our native condition. Confusion is actually what we are, where we are, and how we are.
Those of you that have heard my talks or been to meetings with me and so on, this will be a little bit different. And hopefully it will be interesting and valuable and entertaining for you. This retreat is oriented completely around one thing, very, very, very simple. It's oriented around radiant presence. And we will go at great length and experientially into exactly what that means and what to do about it, if anything. This principle of radiant presence is the very root principle of existence itself. It is the principle of your being. It is the principle of the being of the universe. It's the principle of reality itself existing. This is the absolute root principle. Approaching this directly and nakedly is the most direct, the most fundamental, the most radical spiritual technique, you might say, and is at the root of virtually all of the most powerful spiritual traditions that have existed historically. This root condition of radiant presence is itself the root of realization and the root of confusion. So all suffering that we can experience in terms of misunderstanding our life, in terms of identifying with the difficulty of our circumstances, in terms of all of that, is based solely in this actual condition of radiant presence. And likewise, realization, absolute intrinsic transcendence, absolute freedom, absolute unboundedness is likewise based in this fact. Radiant presence is an actuality. It's not an abstraction. It's not something that one needs to aspire to or imagine or create. The word presence, these two words, radiant, presence, these are very specific words. Presence refers to actuality. Presence refers to being. Your experience is, right? Your experience is actual. It is present. This is an undeniable fact. Exactly what that is and how that is and so on is subtle and strange, to say the least. Radiance refers to all of the characteristics that are present within and as this actuality. All experience, anything whatsoever that shows up in experience, is radiance. And again, exactly what this means we'll go into at great depth and from many different angles over the course of the next 3.5 days. That's all this retreat's about. A very important principle of this retreat is that it's all about you. And when I say you, I'm not talking to a group. I'm talking to the one soul being that is hearing these words. So this is addressed to you. This is about you. It's all about your experience. There will be a certain amount of talking during this retreat. There will be a certain amount of suggestion on my part to try things or explore things, or I'll introduce various ideas and so on. But again and again and again, the sole purpose of these ideas is to refer directly to your experience, right here, right now, in real time. These ideas are not abstractions. They are pointers to actuality that is happening right now, right here, in your experience. So, as much as possible, whenever you play with or explore or receive or hear any of these ideas or suggestions, immediately see if you can find anything within your own actual real-time experience that they might refer to, that it might be relevant to. Because it's all about your experience. The actuality of your experience, presence, the actuality of your very experience right here, right now, which is undeniably the case, is the sole authority. I have no authority. These words have no authority. These, teachings and suggestions and ideas have no authority. The authority is the actuality of your experience. And all of this is relevant only insofar as it ties back into that it touches that it addresses that. Your experience is your power. Your experience is your opportunity. Your experience itself is the doorway to freedom and transcendence and empowerment. The actuality, the very actuality of your experience right here, right now. The radiant presence that you will be directly working with is your teacher, is the authority. It will show you what it is. It will show you what to do. It will answer any questions you have. I can, at best, try to keep steering you again and again to being with that directly. Try and avoid hypnosis. In retreats and these kinds of settings, it's very easy to find yourself in a passive state. There's some guy up here who's talking and going away and teaching and blah, blah, blah. And you go into a passive mode where you're receptive and you're waiting to be told what to do and you're waiting to be spoon-fed, whatever it is you're hoping to be spoon-fed. Always and continually be in self-oriented exploration, active exploration. So if there's an idea being suggested or an experiment being suggested, you take it, you own it, you enact it to whatever extent you seem to be inspired to, and make it real for yourself, not by trying to fit into a teaching or trying to fit into an idea, but look within your own experience, see if you can find an actuality that this might be referring to, because that actuality alone is powerful. It's absolutely useless to try to pretend to fit into teachings or ideas or live up to some sorts of, frames of reference on, or aspire to see things in a certain way or whatever. The actuality of your experience is your opportunity. Not uncontrived, not by you doing something with it or aspiring to something or creating something or pretending or trying to purify it or shut it down. But just what it actually is intrinsically turns out to be your PowerPoint. So be proactive, don't be passive. This is your retreat, so you do it. It's up to you to do it. This is so be active, don't be passive. Don't let yourself go numb and go passive. Be real. Just be who you are, however you happen to be at the moment. Don't try and pretend to be something else. Just be whatever you happen to be. Be what you are. The whole ball of wax, the whole shooting match, whatever that happens to be. Go where it leads. This retreat has no rules. Absolutely none. Do whatever you want. You want to fuck off. You want to go, take the day off and go out in the woods and smoke pot. Go for it. I don't care. Because again, you follow what seems powerful for you, what seems true for you. Because anything other than that is useless. It's a waste of time. It's pretense. It's just passing time. It's just going to tie you up in knots of confusion. Don't try to live up to any teachings or live up to any principles or fake it to be a certain way or something. Just try and find, maybe some things will be suggested and you'll look at them and go, what's this? It has nothing to do with me. Well, okay, it has nothing to do with you. So cool, you just cross it off. You throw it out the window and hang out and do something else. So you are the authority. You are the leader of this retreat. And you're in it alone. This is not a group. This is you. You are here in your experience. So forget everyone else. Who cares about them? This is about you. A nice, interesting, optimistic metaphor for this retreat is you being led into a treasure chamber where there's caskets of jewels and gold and all sorts of inconceivably valuable treasure lying around, and there's no guards. But you have to pick it up. It's not going to jump out of the casket into your pocket. You have to reach out, grab it, own it, and run off with it. So it's your activity, it's your self-orientation that will be your power, that will be your ability to really get something real out of this. Don't wait for permission. Don't wait for it to be brought up. Don't wait for, if you're ahead of the game, be ahead of the game. This is about you. So go where the truth, the verity of your actual experience is taking you. Go with it. Explore it. Run with it. Okay. Central to what we'll be doing here is working with shifting your orientation from a conceptual and defined relationship to experience to an actual felt presence of your experience. which is what is actually present. Non-conceptuality is very useful for this. Non-verbal being with your experience is very useful for this. Silence is very useful for this. Not talking is very useful for this. This is not officially a silent retreat to the extent that it has no rules. So it couldn't very well do that. However, I strongly recommend, if you find yourself going to your usual, I'm sitting in a room and I'm listening to the talk, I strongly recommend you make a point of not talking, just as a way of sort of rehabituating yourself. I mean, obviously we talk a lot, we're all really good at that, we're all really good at connecting, hi, how you doing, what's been going on, blah, 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 blah. And, which is fine, I mean, that's great fun and all that. But for the purposes of what we're doing here, most of us have been overemphasizing that portion, that mode of relating to our experience, and we have been underemphasizing, in a certain sense, our relating to the direct energy that is actually present as the actuality of your experience, which is not verbal, which is not what you think it is, which does not correspond to or conform to your definitions and your labels and your narrations and your stories. It just doesn't. And so to notice that, to make that leap, to really make that the active, most dominant mode of your experience, may help to use some tricks like not talking, like not thinking. Like if you find yourself thinking, go into some more non-verbal sensory experience, and we'll be playing around with all this stuff a lot. This is just sort of a general overview. Most of this retreat is going to consist of experiential exploration, of directly being with these transcendental energies that actually your experience consists of, and discovering what they actually are in their own terms. So, if you find it helpful to be with your experience non-conceptually, I strongly recommend you not talk with other people. If you do want to talk, I very strongly recommend you talk only about real-time experience. Don't talk about the past, don't talk about the future, don't talk too much about definitions of things. You might talk about qualities. This dinner tastes really good to me. That doesn't depart from direct energy presence too much. What do you think about Romney for president? Talk about abstraction on abstraction. It's dizzying. So that kind of conversation is, I don't recommend it. There's no rules. If you want to talk like that, go for it. I don't care. But it's liable to, unless you are at a very profound place with this, which you may well be, because again, you are an individual and you have to be with the actual authority of where you are experientially, what's true for you, not trying to be something that you're supposed to be, or trying to be something that some teaching says you should be or should aspire to be. So be real. So look at yourself. If you're getting caught up in a lot of words, do some of the more nonverbal stuff. If the words can come and go like wind in an empty house, and it doesn't mean anything, then you're immune, you're bulletproof, you're Teflon. That's great. And ultimately, that's where you get to with this. Ultimately, words are not entrapping or a problem at all. But again, this depends upon the maturity with which you are integrated with the actuality of radiant presence that constitutes your being. Now, there's a couple of principles that go hand in hand, which are very powerful and which will be going all through this and all through all of your experience all the time. First of which is what you pay attention to tends to increase in your experience. What you don't pay attention to tends to diminish in your experience. It's pretty simple. So If you find yourself dwelling on something or being with your experience in a certain way, that mode of dwelling or being will tend to get bigger and loom larger and be more dominant in your experience. And likewise, correspondingly, if you tend to ignore something or really just have it be, very minimized part of the attention of your attention to your experience, it will tend to diminish. It will recede in importance and in dominance within your experience. So this is very useful in terms of navigating your experience. You'll find you can navigate how you are with your experience by using this principle and one other principle, which is that curiosity, not willpower, is the navigational force within radiant presence. And intelligence is drawn to what it's interested in. It doesn't go where you try to tell it to go. It's going to go where it's interested in. So the trick is, if you want to go somewhere, find what's interesting about it. Let yourself be seduced by where you want to go, and you will be drawn to it like water flowing downhill. So those two principles are very useful for navigating within your experience. When you give attention to something, it gets bigger in your experience. It gets more permanent. It looms larger and larger. And curiosity is the navigating force. Curiosity is what determines where your attention tends to go. Your attention goes to where it's interested, to where it finds something interesting or powerful or, somehow vibrant or entertaining or whatever.